Hell on earth. Imagine the autumn of 1916, the Western Front of the First World War. Not just rain, but continuous mud mixed with blood and gunpowder. Air that is impossible to breathe deeply. It's thick with the smell of decay and chemical gases. Millions of people, burrowed into the earth like moles, are waging a war of attrition. The front line is not a clear strip, but shreds of trenches stretched across the whole of Europe. It's a stalemate. A bloody, stinking, hopeless stalemate. A soldier with a rifle is a cog in a giant meat grinder. His famous Mauser 98 is accurate, reliable, deadly at hundreds of meters. But what good is it when the enemy is 20 paces away, around a bend in the trench? Reloading it after 5 shots takes an eternity. A bayonet charge? That's suicide under the dagger-like fire of machine guns. The war is frozen, and the generals are going crazy, not knowing how to break the deadlock. And it is in this hell, in conditions seemingly created only for slow and agonizing death, that a genius idea is born. Simple, like a hammer. The idea of a weapon not for long distances, not for sniper fire. It is created to unleash a storm of lead point-blank, face-to-face. A weapon for close combat. A weapon for survival. Thus begins the legend of the MP18. The birth of an idea. How stalemate breeds genius. The idea of creating a compact, automatic weapon that would use pistol cartridges was in the air, but not in the general's offices, right there in the trenches. The soldiers intuitively understood. They needed something between a bulky rifle and a pistol, which in real combat is only good as a last argument. The Imperial German Military Commission merely formally voiced what practice was already screaming about. A weapon for trench warfare was needed. An assault weapon. The first attempts were, let's say, curious. They tried to adapt long-barreled versions of the Luger and Mauser pistols, turning them into makeshift carbines. The results were terrible. Imagine, you're holding an awkward contraption that jumps like crazy when fired, and the bullets go who knows where. Heavy recoil, huge spread. This was not a breakthrough, it was desperation. And now, let's pause for a moment. Think about it. Often, the greatest inventions are born not in the quiet of laboratories, but in mud and blood. It is extreme necessity, the threat of death, that forces the brain to work at its limit. So is here. The stalemate of positional warfare became the mother of the innovation that would change everything. The man who changed everything. Hugo Schmeisser. Here it is, the moment a legend enters history. Hugo Schmeisser. Not a general, not an aristocrat, but an engineer, a designer, a man who thought not about parades, but about efficiency. Working for Theodore Bergman's company, he didn't reinvent the wheel. He took it and created a hammer. His genius was in simplicity. December 1917. A patent. At its heart, the time-tested and war-proven 9 by 19mm parabellum pistol cartridge. And the mechanics? Nothing complicated. The principle of a simple blowback action. When you fire, the recoil energy pushes the bolt back. It compresses a spring, and that spring, returning, chambers a new round. It's brilliant and simple. Why is this so important? Imagine production in wartime. Resources are depleted. Manpower is worth its weight in gold. And here, a relatively simple design. It can be produced quickly, in large quantities, and cheaply, relatively, of course. Schmeisser didn't just create a weapon. He created a concept. The concept of mass-produced automatic infantry weapons. And this concept would live for decades, right up to the present day. Economic note and analysis no. 1. The cost of a breakthrough. There aren't many precise figures on the cost of a single MP18, but we can draw analogies. Producing one Mauser 98 rifle cost Kaiser's Germany roughly 100 marks. This is a very rough average. Producing the MP18, with its milled receiver and complex snail-drawer magazine, was clearly more expensive. Why? Labor costs. But here we see the classic cost versus effectiveness dilemma. The German command was willing to pay more per weapon if it could radically increase the chances of success for their elite stormtroopers. This was an investment in a breakthrough. A bet on quality, not quantity, in the hope that this quality would change the course of the war. In modern terms, it's like investing not in 10 regular soldiers, but in one super soldier with unique gear. The steel claws of the stormtroopers. Baptism by fire. The MP18 wasn't just adopted. It was created for a new breed of warfare, for the stormtroopers, Sturmtruppen. These were not ordinary infantrymen. They were the special forces of their time, the elite. Their tactic was not to sit in a trench, but to quickly, fiercely, like a lightning strike, burst into enemy trenches, sowing panic and death. Spring and summer of 1918. The first batches of MP18s reached the front, and it's a shock for the enemy. Imagine yourself as an Entente soldier. You hear not the measured volleys of rifles, but a mad burst, the sound of tearing cloth. It is the sound of death approaching at an unprecedented speed. In a two-man assault team, one was armed with an MP18 and the second with a rifle and carried a huge ammunition load, 2,500 rounds. It's incredible. This speaks volumes about the density of fire they planned to create. The weapon proved brilliant for clearing trenches and bunkers. A short burst, and the enemy position is suppressed. But here comes the first dramatic twist. The genius had an Achilles heel. That notorious 32-round snail drum magazine, borrowed from the artillery Luger P08. It was a nightmare. Complicated, unreliable, often causing jams. In the heat of battle, inserting it was not easy. It was the embodiment of an old idea bolted onto a new one. And this almost ruined the reputation of a great weapon. An inside look. The anatomy of genius. Let's dissect the MP18 like surgeons. Why was it so good? Appearance. It looked like nothing else. A round receiver in a perforated jacket. Not for beauty, for cooling. The barrel in battle would heat up red hot, and the jacket allowed it to breathe, at least a little. Simplicity of the trigger mechanism. Automatic fire only. No safety. The bolt was locked in the rear position, and that was it. Your safety was ready. Nothing superfluous. A tactical trick. The magazine was attached on the left. This is genius. Why? When firing from around a corner of a trench or from behind cover, the magazine sticking down didn't prevent you from pressing closer to the ground or wall. You exposed less of yourself, meaning you had a better chance of survival. A small thing? No. A thoughtful detail behind which stood soldiers' lives. Key specifications, as in the text, but with comments. Weight, 3.7 kilograms without a magazine. Loaded, almost 5.25 kilograms. A bit heavy? Yes, but that's the price for reliability and stability when firing. Length, 815 millimeters. Compact enough for tight trenches. Rate of fire, 600 rounds per minute. That's 10 rounds per second. For the year 1918, the rate of a machine gun in the hands of one soldier. Effective range, 200 meters. Modest, but honest. This is a weapon for CN kill distance. Schmeisser almost immediately understood the problem with the snail drum and already in 18 created a version with a straight box magazine, the MP18-4. But even here it wasn't smooth, jams remained. This problem will be finally solved by his followers. Life after death. The Versailles Treaty and the secret legacy. The war was lost. The Treaty of Versailles. Shackles for Germany. The Germans were forbidden to have automatic weapons. It seemed like the end for the MP18. But no, this is the beginning of its second secret life. Official production stopped? Yes, but until 1920, it continued to be produced for the police. In total, 17,677 units were produced. A small number for a frontline weapon, but its influence was colossal. Then begins the stage of technology spreading. The Bergmann Company transfers the license to the Swiss company SIG, and they, pedantic and precise, create their own version, the Bergmann SIG Model 1920. And it begins its journey around the world. Finland, China, Japan. The Japanese even managed to attach a bayonet to it. Imagine this hybrid of automatic fire and cold steel. Estonia creates its own version at the Arsenal factory. Finland attempts to establish its own production. The MP18 becomes a virus that, despite all prohibitions, infects the minds of gunsmiths across the planet. Economic note and analysis no. 2. The arms business in the shadow of bans. After the Treaty of Versailles, the German arms industry went underground. But how did it survive? Through neutral countries. Transferring licenses to Switzerland is a classic scheme to circumvent restrictions. German engineers and technologies worked under foreign brands. The Bergmann firm probably made good money from this. License fees, sales of documentation. This allowed them to preserve intellectual potential and cash flows. It was a forced move into the shadows, which, paradoxically, only strengthened the global influence of the German arms school. The bans gave rise to cunning cooperation schemes that would later allow the Third Reich to quickly restore its military power. The father of legends, the invisible hand of the MP18 in history. And now, for the most interesting part. Let's use our imagination and look at the weapons we know in a new way. The Soviet PPSh, the legend of the Great Patriotic War, the weapon of victory. Look at its design. Simple blowback? Yes. Use of a pistol cartridge? Yes. A straight box and drum magazine? Yes. The whole concept of suppressive fire for close combat. It comes from there, from the trenches of World War I, from the MP18. Georgy Schmeisser was a genius, but he stood on the shoulders of a giant, Hugo Schmeisser. The German MP40, a direct descendant. Recognizable appearance, improved design. But the foundation is the same. The British Sten, cheap, simple, stamped. It was created in a hurry, but the idea was the same. Simple blowback, pistol cartridge compactness. It was a democratized version of Schmeisser's concept. The American Thompson. It was a contemporary of the MP18, but the Tommy gun was complex, expensive. It was called the trench broom. The MP18 showed that effectiveness could be simpler and cheaper. The MP18 is not just the first of its kind. It is the DNA of the entire class of submachine guns. It set the canon that remained unchanged for 30 years. Imagine, in 1918, it was an alien technology, and by 1943, it was in the hands of millions of soldiers around the world in the form of the PPSh, the Sten, and the MP40. This is a phenomenal legacy, a shadow in history that changed everything. So why is the MP18 less known than the PPSh or MP40? Because it was the pioneer. It existed on the front lines for a short time. It was eclipsed by more mass-produced and successful descendants. But it was the one that blazed the trail through the jungle of military doctrines. It was born in the hell of positional warfare to give a soldier a chance at life and victory in the hell of close combat. It was made by a genius who understood that the future lay not in a precise shot at a kilometer, but in a storm of fire at 20 meters. It was condemned to death by the Treaty of Versailles, but became immortal, multiplying in thousands of copies across the globe. Next time you see a Soviet soldier with a PPSh or a German with an MP40 in a movie, remember this story. Remember the trenches of 1918. Remember Hugo Schmeisser. Remember the MP18. Because without it, the picture of the Second World War would have been completely different. This weapon didn't just shoot bullets. It shot into the future. So, our saga about the world's first submachine gun has come to an end. I hope it was as exciting for you as it was for me. And now, for the most important part. Your opinion is the fuel for our next stories. Write in the comments, what weapon, in your opinion, was the most important invention of the 20th century? And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our new investigations. We still have so many unexplored mysteries of military history ahead of us. Thank you for being with us.